Hi, Matt here. And yeah, I'm fresh back from my holiday and not very tired. So I'm recording my July Q&A, so don't forget about it. And this month I've only got one question, so it's going to be an easy one. Easy one. It's going to be a shorter one than normal because, yeah, I've only got the one question. So this month the question is from Attila, and he asks, Hi Matt, I have a question about Theater of Mind gameplay. If I only want to use Zoom for a short campaign, what tips could you give me to make my game as smooth as possible? I would like to run a bunch of different games, and I think preparing Foundry for every single one would take forever. Yeah, I would agree with you. I think if you're planning on running short campaigns or you're just planning on trying out a bunch of different games, then Foundry is probably overkill unless you're running, prepared stuff where um, yeah, just thinking of the Free League stuff, you can get some of the official campaigns already preloaded in Foundry. So really, it's all in there. But if you're not doing them, you're running all sorts of different systems, etc., and they don't have official support. You've got to do all that yourself. Then yeah, it's a lot of effort for one shots, two shots, single scenarios, or short campaigns. So absolutely see the dilemma. I have done a ton of Theater of the Mind games, both as a GM and as a player. Probably most famously as a player in the Carrion Company series on Mud and Blood and now Toa Tabletop. Those were completely done over Zoom, and we didn't have any virtual tabletop. We had an Excel, or I should say, a Google Sheets kind of combined character workbook, if you will. So all of our character sheets were in this one online workbook that we could all access and update our sheets. It had a sheet for the campaign information, etc. And that worked really, really well. We rolled physical dice. We didn't even have a dice roller. Um, and that was possible because the GM trusted us not to fudge our rolls, and all of us playing are also GMs, so we kind of fully appreciate that. Failing is a big integral part of any story, and we're keen to highlight our failures. So there was no fudging of dice rolls or anything like that. At least not from my perspective. I obviously couldn't see anyone else's, but we failed a hell of a lot of times, and I was going through my fate points in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay like there was no tomorrow. So yeah. Anyway, the point is that's a fairly crunchy game. There is a very very good Foundry implementation for it. But our GM wanted to do Theater of the Mind, and we ran it that way, and it's to this date probably the best campaign I've ever been involved in. So there's a lot to say for Theater of the Mind. It keeps everything in the imagination. You're not fiddling around with virtual tabletops, especially at the start of a campaign. There's usually a learning curve for everyone involved as they're getting used to how that system's been set up. Thinking about Foundry specifically, but really any game. And messing around with potentially macros and permissions and dice rolling syntax if you're using a Discord dice bot. All those little things can be quite distracting. So my recommendations are if you're using, you can use Zoom. You can also use Discord video. And in fact, in the Three Skulls Tavern Discord server, it's been boosted already, and I've set up a room specifically for people to be able to use for gaming. And I say it's been boosted because when you boost the server, you get access to better quality video and better quality audio. So if you wanted to run games in there, you just have to let me know who needs to get like permission to go into these rooms. The rooms are all set up. They'll be just for you and your players if you wanted to use them. That means you don't have to set up anything else yourself. I'll happily install bots for you if you want to have bots running, for your game, etc. So Zoom is definitely possible, but Discord is a free option if you want to use it. So that's really all you need, and you need a way to like look at character sheets. I've played games where there have been PowerPoint presentation, or the equivalent is Google for like Google's Office tools is Google Slides. So I've seen character sheets that have been together into Google Slides. which is probably a slightly more pretty way of having them, a slightly more like a PDF way of having them than sheets, workbooks. But I prefer workbooks because you can do a lot more with them. You can have some automation built in. And I'm an Excel junkie. I did a lot of courses in Excel and, advanced macro use and stuff when I was working my old day job. So I love spreadsheets. So spreadsheets are what I naturally gravitate towards and what I prefer to use, but there's lots of different ways you could do it. And I think that's kind of key, is having a way that all of the players can get their character sheets to you as the GM so you can see them, and as they're being updated, like if they're changing their trauma values, like their hit points or wounds or whatever, as they're being changed during the game, you can kind of see that as well. And that's best handled with some sort of like shared character book, if you will, or character portfolio, maybe you would want to call it, which is where all your sheets are in one place. And that's really best handled by something like a Google Sheets workbook or a Google Slides presentation, for want of a better word, where everyone's character sheets are a separate slide. And everybody's got access to it. Everyone can theoretically could change every single slide, but people will only change their own. So that's how I'd recommend doing it. There would be some setup to get the sheets running, but the nice thing about Google Sheets, the spreadsheet program, is that most games have a character sheet in Google Sheets because it's very popular for online play. The various communities will often have somebody who set one up. So really, the work is mostly done for you in most, assuming the game is not like some really abstract indie game that hardly anybody has ever played. If there's a community for the game, there's likely to be a Google Sheets character sheet implementation. So that makes it really easy to provide something that everyone can use, and it means there's very little setup time on your end as well. Apart from that, in terms of Theater of the Mind gameplay, I guess having done it as a GM, some games do require a knowledge of, like, if you're getting into a combat situation, you'll need to see how the various players and the adversaries are kind of located on a map, on a battle map, right? And you can describe all this to the players. You can, it kind of takes some getting used to, but really, if you listen to our Carrying Company actual play on Mud and Blood, and or Toa Tabletop, you can hear it in practice. Any of the combats that happen in there, the players had no visibility of any battle maps whatsoever. It was literally what the GM was telling us about what we were seeing, what we were into, like just where we were on the battlefield, what we could see, if we wanted to shoot somebody that was at a distance, we'd ask like how far are they. The GM would tell us, a range band equivalent or the distance in meters or whatever it happens. In Wolfrip, it was, an actual distance, but it could be a range in meters or zones or whatever. The players don't really need to have a visibility of a tactical map to like make those decisions. They can ask the decisions on the spot. It kind of keeps things, from my perspective, having been a player on like in this type of thing, it makes it feel a bit more chaotic because you don't see the overall picture. You're not as in control of, or you don't feel as in control of. It's less like a chess game and more like a first-person shooter, if you will. It feels much more chaotic. It feels much more like probably what a combat actually would feel like, because you're not taking this like overhead view of everything happening all at once and making a lot of really meta decisions quite often on what you're going to do next based on knowing where the various pieces are on the board. It's pitched very much in the first person, and as the GM, it can take some getting used to in terms of like how that's portrayed to your players. But it's not difficult to do. It's just if you're used to using battle maps, then it's something to just be conscious of and try and think about giving good descriptions to your players of of their surroundings, where their foes are, where their adversaries are, etc., so they can make informed decisions. But other than that, like, it's pretty straightforward. Any handouts you have where you would normally be sharing a handout in a virtual tabletop, you literally can just share it in Discord or however you're communicating with them. If you're using Google Sheets, you could even have like a handouts sheet in your workbook where you could just theoretically insert an image into that worksheet. I've actually done that before in a game where I was actually a player, but I set up the character sheet because I was the Excel person in the group. And I set up a handouts tab because some of the players, we weren't using Discord, we were using WhatsApp to communicate with each other, and people were saying that the GM had said they didn't really want to have handouts. He wanted us focused on, if we're going to look at anything other than the Zoom call, he wanted us to be looking at the character sheet workbook, and therefore he wanted there to be a handouts tab in it. And so I kind of set that up as a separate tab and like showed him before we ran the game, how to use it, with like how to insert an image, which is pretty straightforward in Google Sheets. So you could do it that way, but really I think probably if everyone's using Discord anyway, then using Discord is probably the way to go. I would strongly advise against using a dice bot in Discord, just because a lot of people struggle with the syntax. It slows the game down while people are trying to like type in and remember what the syntax is that they need to use to get the bot to roll for them. Even if they're just copying from a previous post, it happens all the time that somebody gets the letters slightly out of sync and it doesn't roll, and it just like kills the game like flow pretty strongly. In a virtual tabletop, that's one of the beauties of them having integrated dice rollers. You can just click something on the character sheet and the dice are instantly rolled. You don't even have to think about like how many dice you're rolling or anything like that. It's just automatically done. That's one of the beauties of them. But I would strongly recommend if you're doing Theater of the Mind, then I would strongly recommend that everyone use rolls physical dice if they can. If they can't, then I would look at maybe asking people if there's like a dice app. I'm thinking of games like popular games like Legend of the Five Rings or Genesis or Fantasy Flight games, Star Wars, that have very specific specialty dice that not everyone's going to want to go out and buy. But there are dice apps that people can download on like the Google Play Store or the iTunes App Store, to be able to roll the dice digitally and just tell you what the results are. And some of them, like Genesis and Fantasy Flight Games, also have like online web tools that do the same thing, like RPG Sessions is a website for them. And I'm sure there's a bunch for other games where you can basically have like a collaborative room to roll dice, where you can set up a room while you're playing, and they roll, like your players will roll the dice. They can't fudge them because they're being rolled digitally, but they're actually like clicking graphically on the dice they want to roll rather than typing in syntax and getting it wrong. So it's a bit nicer, it's a bit easier to do rolls rather than the way Discord handles it. And that's probably about it, really. I mean, other than that, like you really want to have the video if you can, because I think, personal preference maybe, and some people don't like to show themselves on a video, but really, even when you're playing online, it's good to be able to see people's reactions. It's good to be able to see as a GM if someone's concentration starts, drifting somewhere else, or you notice that there's suddenly like, you think that, they're in the game, but they're like, they're on Chrome browsing Reddit or something. It's pretty obvious to tell that. And that can be okay at certain times if you're really focusing on a different group or something. But if you're hoping that everyone's engaged and people are drifting off, you're not going to be able to see that if you don't have videos. So I think video is really important for you to be able to make sure that you're keeping your players engaged. And other than that, just everything I've just said. So yeah, in summary, you need a way to have character sheets all together, ideally. And you need to have video. Oh, battle maps. I kind of went off on a tangent there. As a GM, what I often would have is a scrap sheet of paper in front of me, and I would just sketch really, really, like really rough, because I'm the only one looking at this, a really, really rough indication of like a battle map. And I would either have minis prepared for, or like beads or something for like whatever you want to use for your player characters and for the adversaries, and I would move them around on the map as the game was progressing. So I basically had that tactical overview of what was happening, that meta overview, because I'm the GM and I need to have that. But the players don't. They specifically, deliberately don't have that overview. So even if you are doing it that way, you're like you're doing this sort of like first person thing that I've suggested. You're doing tactical combats. You as the GM will still need to have a sort of a battle map, but because your players aren't seeing it, it doesn't need to be pretty at all. Don't spend a lot of time on the battle map. Literally just sketch something out really quickly beforehand in your prep. It doesn't need to take you more than a couple of minutes. Find some tokens or some beads or whatever, if you don't want to use minis, that you can basically determine who's who when you've got like placed them on this map, battle map in front of you. And don't tell your players, don't, like, they shouldn't know that you're doing that, because they might start asking to see a photograph of the current situation. Just don't even make it, I mean, you can even lie to them if you want to, but like really just don't even make it a thing. Just be like, all right, this is what's happening. You're keep it all in the narrative, keep it all happening like from what their characters are seeing, and describe for them each, like, what their options are, who they can see, etc., and ask them what they want to do. And that way they're fully immersed in the situation. The combat's going to feel really visceral and chaotic, and really that's the best way to do it. So yeah, all the stuff I just said, plus a battle map for a sketch scrap battle map basically, and some way to track characters like minis or tokens or whatever, and that's really it. And again, I have that Discord, those Discord channels created, but they're empty. I don't even think everybody can see them, because they're invite only, so you basically have to request to have a room and I'll let you use it. But if you want to go that route, then by all means feel free. So thanks very much for the question, Attila. That's the only question I've had for July. So thanks, Attila, for asking. And there will be a Q&A post going up on Patreon at the beginning. I think the 3rd of August is when it's scheduled for questions for August. So if you have any questions for August, you'll see that. And coming up, like, I guess next week, 2 weeks time. And get your questions in then. All right. Thanks very much. And catch you next time. Cheers. Bye-bye.